heard this week, things that have happened. Swastikas were spray painted on a couple of schools in Albuquerque, and other racist graffiti on another. A young person stood up in the cafeteria in one of our high schools and shouted, "Latinos, go home!" At UNM, a male student in a Trump t-shirt tried to remove the hijab from a female student's head. At another university, Baylor in Texas, a black student, a young woman named Natasha, was on her way to her 10 a.m. class when a white man shoved her into the street and said, "No N-words on the sidewalk." He said the word. She told the story in a video on Twitter. A hashtag started, #IWalkWithNatasha. 2 days later, she had a very different trip to her 10 a.m. class. 300 students gathered to walk with her. Another day, a member of our congregation, a person of color, was buying something at a local business when the employee said, "You're not one of them Muslims, are you?" Another day, just before the election, a member of our congregation who identifies as a white lesbian woman had her Hillary sign stolen from her front yard and replaced with a death threat. It said, "Death to Hillary and her fan." This week, someone left her another note, this time taped to her front gate, and she says she was a little apprehensive after the last one, but instead of threatening her life, this note said, "Hello, I saw your flag a few evenings ago when I was walking my dogs, and I wanted to thank you for displaying it. I'm curious to know where you got it. I'd like one too, probably to display in my office at UNM, where I teach. Many of my students are suffering deep distress and fear for their future. Frankly, I am too." This member had had the American flag hanging from the day before the election to the day after Veterans Day. She herself is a veteran. And then she replaced it with this one. There. This is Judy. She's the one this happened to. Thank you for letting me share your story, Judy. She has the same thing as a bumper sticker on her truck, but with rainbow colors. The Southern Poverty Law Center says over 700 hate crimes have been reported since Election Day. Also this week, a known white supremacist, what the media accommodatingly refers to as a white nationalist or a member of the alt-right, was marked for one of the highest positions of leadership in our country, White House chief strategist and senior counselor. How are you doing? I've heard from many of you that you've been feeling up and down. You're going along okay, staying busy, and then anxiety, sadness, grief, or anger hit you. Even our sermon signboard changed. If you passed by it this week, you might have noticed that on Wednesday, the sermon title changed from gratitude to resistance. It also switched from Christine to Angela. We traded Sundays, so now Christine will give her gratitude sermon next week instead. But the two topics are not unrelated, and I'll say more about that. It's a volatile time. The results of the election were shocking to many of us, and yet for others, for many indigenous people, people of color, LGBTQ people, immigrants, and disabled people, all of whom have been targets of our president-elect's bigotry, as have women of all kinds. For many of those folks, the results were not as shocking, especially if they live outside of the big cities. For some, the outcome just confirmed what they had already been experiencing. This is especially true for people who bear the brunt of multiple prejudices at the intersections of identities: queer, women of color, disabled immigrants. It's just finally all out in the open. Social and political liberals have been called out for living in a bubble, for ignoring the rage building in rural America where young, unemployed men are as ripe for radicalization here as they are in Arab countries or anywhere else. There have been many calls to understand conservative rural voters. And this is partly right, to borrow a phrase from Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a mantra in his book called How to Love. You are partly right. It is partly right that listening will be required in order to repair and protect the soul of this nation. But this is no time for quick political reconciliation that is actually an accommodation. This is no time, and there never is a time, to accommodate bigotry. Racial tension has been laid out in the open, not only between people of color and people who openly support racism, but also among progressives. Some people of color have called out white progressives for not doing enough already to put an end to racism. A Black interfaith colleague of mine forwarded a Facebook post expressing tremendous anger at white progressives, blaming them for the election, saying that if they are so anti-racist, they should have confronted their white racist relatives and taught them better. When I read this, my first thought was, my God, how often have I banged my head against the wall trying to do just that? I have at various times gotten into fights, engaged in thoughtful dialogue, and in one case, been cut off from an entire branch of my extended family since I was 16 years old due to confronting their racism and misogyny. Yet I cannot think of a single time I converted anyone. That was my first thought. Defense, defense, defense. But my second thought was, no, she's partly right. The truth in her message is that white people often do remain quiet when they observe racism. At the holiday dinner table or on social media or at work, usually out of fear or a feeling of futility, hopelessness, I think. And maybe if those whites never ever put up with it, it would be almost gone already. For the same reason, some anti-racism activists are asking hard questions about the safety pin symbol. People, and not just white people, are wearing safety pins as a symbol that they'll stand with anyone who's being bullied, whether it's for race, gender, religion, or anything else. Remember the bigotry and entitlement reflected in the presidential campaign, and now our president-elect's cabinet appointments go way beyond race. But it is anti-racism activists who are asking, is the safety pin a trend or a movement? Will white people put them on and just leave it at that, just a symbol? Or will the pin remind them of the promise they are making to stand up and speak up, to walk the walk? One Huffington Post article that's been making the rounds this week framed that question in a deeply shaming, cynical, and I'm afraid paralyzing way. We don't have time for that. We need to show each other that we are here for each other. We've got to steer our anger, sadness, worry, and everything else in a productive direction. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not calling for quick social reconciliation among social progressives either. This is an important moment of tension and conflict. This is a conversation that needs to happen. It's necessary in order for us to move our society forward on the right path. This swirl of deep feelings, identities, betrayals, and commitments is a necessary and creative chaos. It reminds me of creation narratives. Remember how in humankind's ancient stories, the condition for new realities to be born seems always to be chaos or darkness. In the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, Tiamat, the mother of creation, is a raging, swirling sea full of monsters. The Greek poet Hesiod sang of chaos as one of the main conditions required for the creation of the cosmos. Chaos accompanied Mother Earth, the underworld, and love. From chaos came the night. From the night came air and day. The Bible begins with God hovering over a formless deep. Who knows what was in there? Even science presents us with the primordial swamp. milieus of matter that swirled and mixed until the ensuing chemical reactions led to life. Chaos, we know something about this. But how do we not lose our bearings in it? How do we practice resistance when we're waiting for and we're helping a new reality to be born? People of faith have deep wells of wisdom for times such as this. Now, I know that faith, and in this country, especially Protestant faith, has been co-opted, hijacked, and misappropriated to justify accruing more power for the powerful. The very kind of prosperity gospels that Jesus of Nazareth staged such a brilliant protest against, such resistance against, the thing that he spoke out against time and time again have become almost the face of our country. Contorted versions of the good news in which those who are unlucky are deemed to have deserved it. But that is a perversion of the ancient tradition of love and justice from which this church emerged. It's as the Reverend Dr. William Barber says, those who claim to live by the scriptures but find no priority for political or economic justice in them are morally corrupt. The scriptures have more than 2,000 verses regarding poverty, but only about 5 regarding homosexuality and not 1 about abortion. Every major world religion includes some version of the Golden Rule, teachings on mercy and compassion. You who love justice and mercy, you who believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person and who long in your wild human hearts for it to be realized, you have not been rejected. Something higher has been rejected. Do not accept what is being offered to you in its place. Resist resignation. Resist hopelessness. Resist terror. Resist accepting the lie that you are powerless. Listen to the words of the great Gwendolyn Brooks in her poem, Speech to the Young, Speech to the Progress Toward. Gwendolyn Brooks, who wrote for her children and all people looking forward during times of holy struggle. Say to them, say to the down keepers, the sun slappers, the self-soilers, the harmony hushers, even if you are not ready for day, it cannot always be night. You will be right, for that is the hard home run. Live not for battles won. Live not for the end of the song. Live in the along. Live in the along. We're in for a long haul, which means we cannot prepare ourselves as though it were a quick campaign. Sadness, anger, and fear will only carry us so far. The strength that sustains this kind of resistance comes from the heart and the spirit. So let us make our homes for now in this chaos. Allow yourself to be in harmony with uncertainty so that when you are called to action, you won't be already exhausted. Breathe, feed your body and spirit. Get centered and give thanks for what is good and beautiful. Remember that we are made for play and joy as well as striving. Surround yourself with friends. There's a story in the Gospels. It takes place when Jesus' close friend John has been decapitated by the king. John is Jesus' cousin. Their friendship, the Gospels say, began even before they were born. When Jesus was beginning his activism, his ministry, John went before him, preparing the way. And now he has been brutally killed by the king, who did so because John called him out for being unethical, and the king felt harassed. The first thing Jesus does is retreat to an island. Here, I picture him like Natasha in her room, recording her thoughts, which will be cast out into the great chaos of the World Wide Web. Jesus goes into seclusion and casts his thoughts as prayers to the great chaos of God, whom the scriptures by this point have gone out of their way to tell us is not a man-like being in the sky, but something much more unnameable and wild than that. By this point, the God of the scriptures, whose name means I am, has shown up as storm, wind, fire, silence, and more than once as a stranger, an other, an outsider. That's what Jesus prays to. When he returns to shore, there are hundreds waiting for him. He receives them, telling his disciples who've been waiting, "Go on ahead to that island where I was without me, and I'll catch up later." But by the time he's ready to do so, it's storming. Remember, he prayed to a God who's been known to show up as a storm. The boat he was going to take has blown away from shore, and so this is the story in which Jesus walks on water. Across the storm-tossed sea, and he sees his disciples paddling furiously, trying to reach him. They had given up on waiting. When they see their teacher, they don't recognize him. This happens so often in the Bible. People see their wisdom teacher or even the face of the divine, and instead of recognizing it, they get scared and freak out. "It's a ghost," the disciples yell. Jesus says, "It's not a ghost, it's me." Except the phrase used for "it's me" could also be translated, "I am," just like the name of God. And so what they're hearing is, God is here in the storm. Now from the boat, a disciple named Peter says, "Okay then, call me to walk on water toward you." And Jesus says, "You're on." Peter steps out of the boat. He takes a few steps. He's doing it. And then he turns his head. He remembers the enormity and scariness of the storm, and he starts to sink. Pulling him out of the water by the arm, Jesus says, "You are a man of half faith." Partly right. You know, usually when this story is told, the focus is on Jesus walking on the water, right? But I don't think that story is really about Jesus at all. It's about Peter, the regular guy, the everyday person, a disciple of love and wisdom who, like all of Jesus' disciples in the Gospels, doesn't always get it, who sometimes takes their eye off the face of love and truth that empowers and sustains them and starts to sink. You can stay clinging to that boat, to what is no longer useful in the storm, and go under. You can start walking and get distracted and sink, or you can keep focused on what deeply guides you and stay steady. Our mission, this congregation's mission, is the same as it was before the election, just bigger, stronger, louder, and more urgent. We're called now to walk into, speak into, lean into, and live into who we know we are. We've got to keep our eye on the prize and our hearts and souls tended to and focused during this time. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know exactly what we're going to need to do. But there are some ways of practicing resistance and being constructive, starting now. Number one, when you leave this place today, almost the first thing that's going to happen is Thanksgiving. A complicated holiday. Spiritually, it's on point. Giving thanks is good for the soul, especially when times are tough. Absolutely do it. But the holiday is also tied to a national myth that shapes our sense of who we are. It's a myth that caught on during the Civil War when Abraham Lincoln told a partly right story of pilgrims and natives eating together. He told the story as a way to encourage unity in the divided country. It became part of how white America remembers its origin story, that whites came to this land to create a democratic society in which people could be free. In reality, after the first Thanksgiving, whites conducted a brutal campaign of genocide against Native people, and they violently enslaved millions of Africans for generations. Alice Walker says, "The problem with this country is amnesia." So I challenge you, I invite you, I dare you to begin your Thanksgiving meal with a prayer or a spoken meditation in which you lift up what you're thankful for, and also lament that our country was founded through genocide, that it suffers to this day from the original sins of greed and violence, and that the powerful continue to allow extreme poverty while they accumulate unmerited wealth. Close it with your most ambitious prayer for peace, for reconciliation, and for wholeness in our country and the world. When your uncle says, "I'll bet you voted for crooked Hillary," no matter who you voted for or didn't, I invite you to respond with a soft front and a strong back. Say, racism and sexism are as wrong now as they were 400 years ago. I can't support it, and because I love you, I'd like to think you won't support it either. Number 2, if you feel safe doing so, safe enough, wear your safety pin. We have more of them available here. It isn't just a sign of racial solidarity, though it is that too. It's also for people like the Syrian refugee family who were embraced in the sanctuary on the day after the election. They were so scared. It's for the children who are being told to go back to Mexico when they are our children, our city's children. It's for transgender people. It's for everyone who might be bullied. Not everyone feels safe enough. Some people, those who are already targets, may worry that the pin makes them even more of a target. So if you can, put on your pin and fly your flag and use whatever signs and symbols you have to show that you are not on board with bigotry. Number 3, call Congress or send a letter. Let's make sure they are inundated. Number 4, attend a resistance workshop. We'll be scheduling anti-racism workshops here soon. We're hosting a training in community organizing on the afternoon of Sunday, December 11th, and lots of other organizations are holding workshops. Keep an eye out for those. Number 5, give. Give to the organizations that empower marginalized people, end oppression, or honor civil or reproductive rights. Black Lives Matter, Strong Families New Mexico, Planned Parenthood, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, Equality New Mexico, El Centro. Give a little or a lot. Give what you can. Give to your church. We are $60,000 away from reaching our pledge target next year. You can take a pledge card from the seat backs, fill it out, and drop it off at the office on your way out today. Make a dent in that gap. Help us be here and be strong for you and for whatever 2017 brings by letting us know how much support we can expect from you next year. Today, I'm increasing my pledge by 10%. When we give, we magnify our impact. We aren't just one little person anymore. We're spreading our power around. Number 6, consider attending a march and invite other UUs to join you. If you let us know that you're going, we can help you publicize it and invite people to meet you there. I already know 2 mothers and daughters in this congregation who are attending the Million Women March in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. There will be another women's march here in New Mexico the day after, and men are welcome too. Finally, keep each other close. This is a great time to reach out to each other and deepen relationships. There is comfort and strength in community. We're going to be called to show up, to march, and to speak, and to sing. When I attended a workshop with the Reverend Dr. William Barber a few months ago, he had a whole day with us, and he and his team spent fully half of it preaching about how important music is to movements and leading us in song. So let's sing. Susan's going to help us get ready for marching and singing this morning by teaching us a couple of parts of our closing hymn, a song I have found myself singing all week.
All right. So it's number 163, but I don't think you'll need your books very long. So if you use your book for the first verse to get used to it, this is, I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. And I'll call out the first line of each verse. Woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning. for this last verse, you got to put those books down and you got to get your hands together. You don't need the books. It's the same line. I woke up this morning with my mind. Make up something, right?